Thanks for listening to Live Forever Young Radio. On the show today, we will be speaking with Ann Harrison, author of Rev Up Your Adult Stem Cell Power. Stem cells are amazing, but they need nutrition too. Bob and Ann share some great ways to make sure your stem cells get what they need to renew and repair your body so you can live your best life. So sit back, relax, and get ready to live forever young.
Welcome to Live Forever Young Radio. I'm Bob, and I'm here with Ann Harrison, the author of Rev Up Your Stem Cell Power. And we're here with Raleigh Culp also.
Hey, guys.
Who's going to contribute to our program today. And we've been on together twice before on Live Forever Young Radio. Mm-hmm. And once we talked all about adult stem cells, and today we're going to talk about after the stem cell is released from your bone marrow, comes out of into the blood and travels and then morphs into the various types of cells, your liver cells, your heart cells, brain cells. Then from that point on, what do we need to do to protect those cells and nourish those cells? In the same content, we'll talk about nourishing the adult stem cell itself while it's in the bone marrow.
I think that's a really important topic, Bob, because 9 years ago when I did research about that book, to write the book, nobody ever talked about stem cell nutrition after, they're released from the bone marrow. It's really important. Those stem cells are so precious. Once they get where they need to go to morph, within 48 to 72 hours to become that new cell type, we don't want them to die. No. When they made all that trouble to get where they need to go to renew, repair, and regenerate our organs and tissues.
If we're going to be feeding, we can start with that part. If we're going to be feeding these new cells, because a cell has a membrane that allows nutrients to pass through that membrane down into the cell, and it also allows toxins to go out through that membrane. And then inside the cell itself are multiple different organelles and your DNA, and you have DNA both in the nucleus and you have DNA in your mitochondria, which is one of the organelles, right? Mm-hmm. And so we need to talk about what exactly are the substrates or nutrients that brand new cell needs in order to function properly and, as you said, not die off too soon. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to eat food or we're going to take nutritional supplements like the total health system, the first thing we have to do is properly digest it. And a lot of people forget that digestion starts in your mouth. So when you first take food into your mouth, immediately your mouth starts secreting enzymes, and you also have bacteria in your mouth that help digest food. And a very big part of your digestion is making sure that that part happens so that when the food arrives in your stomach, it's already partly digested, mm-hmm. right? And so to make sure that you leave the food in your mouth for a while and chew it. So if you're eating food, chew really well. Mm-hmm. And if you are drinking something like the powder that you dissolve in a glass of water with the total health system, you want to leave that liquid in your mouth for a little bit. Don't just drink it down your throat, right? Take some into your mouth. It tastes pretty good. Yeah. So bring it into your mouth, let it sit for a little while, have a small amount in your mouth, and then swallow that, and then take another small amount to put in your mouth. This helps with that digestion.
The stimulation of the digestive enzyme.
Yeah. And for example, if you're looking at trying to help your cells to receive more nutrients through proper circulation, you have to have arginine and you have to have nitric oxide, right, mm-hmm. in order to make that happen, to dilate your capillaries, right? And so if you're trying to get nitric oxide, when people take in foods that contain nitrogen, like beets, right? Yeah. It's in the form of NO3. And in your mouth, it gets broken to NO2, so that when it arrives in your stomach, you can break it into NO or nitric oxide so that it actually begins to dilate your capillaries. But if you fail to chew the food and you just gulp a glass of beet juice, it's going to arrive in your stomach without having that first stage of digestion happen. And so you'll actually never make the nitric oxide. So you can go to all the trouble to have a very healthy drink, but if you don't let your mouth help digest it, it's useless essentially.
That's interesting. I would never
Yeah.
thought drinking something would you would need to stimulate something when you're drinking something for
Yeah.
digestive purposes.
Yeah, and then also as people age, this becomes even more important because once you finish chewing your food, it arrives in your stomach. Now you need digestive enzymes and acid to further digest that food, right? But as we age, we produce less of these digestive enzymes, and so it makes it important to have access to a good digestive enzyme that you can take by mouth with your meals, right? And that's one part of it, is that initial digestion. But then as the food arrives, it is finished being digested, it's in a highly acidic form in your stomach, right? Your stomach's highly acidic environment, and it needs to be alkalized, or it needs to change its pH more towards alkaline before it can drop down into your small intestine. Your small intestine is not made for accepting acidic chyme, which is the liquid of digested food, into your small intestine. It likes it to be alkalized. So just before it gets ready to drop down in, you actually secrete alkalizing enzymes, right, from your pancreas.
Yeah.
It helps to alkalize it, and you can make sure that you have a digestive enzyme that also contains those alkalizing enzymes that your pancreas would have to do the work normally. But
Aren't you supposed to make digestive enzymes normally? Why did you gotta take extra ones?
no, as you age, you make less.
Oh, okay. My bad.
Right. And so you make a lot of different compounds that you normally make. You make less of as you age.
Gotcha.
Okay, and that's one of them. And so then they have to, once that alkalized chyme arrives in your small intestine, it's going to absorb nutrients from that chyme, whether it's nutrients from food or nutrients from nutritional supplements, and that's done by the villi, the little hairs in your small intestine,
Right.
are going to absorb those nutrients.
Yep, they're like fingers that pull the nutrients out of the food.
And you and I were talking earlier about how those villi need to constantly have new life given to them, because as you age, they tend to get coated over by a plaque, and they get smothered, and they'll actually die off, right?
But you said a long time ago to me that your villi has that hard plaque even as early as maybe age 30.
Yes, it starts.
Because when we say age, we're thinking like baby boomers, but it happens
Yeah.
a lot earlier in life.
Yeah. Well, and people are aging earlier now than they were before because of so many toxins, which we'll talk about later. And also, because way more people now are overweight than we used to have. And so they're aging faster from being overweight. And we can talk about that too. So with the villi, now you want to be able to, as you age, you want to have something that will constantly cleanse the plaque off of the villi, right? And that you can do with superoxide dismutase, which is a compound that's like a Pac-Man molecule that seeks out free radicals and toxins and absorbs them and moves them out of your body. And that's a compound that's in one of the products from Boomers Forever Young that is a sprouted barley seed product, heirloom barley and gladiator barley. And so that compound will cleanse out your small intestine.
The SOD, that stands for superoxide dismutase.
Yes, and it'll cleanse that plaque away and regrow those little villi. They're made from glucosamine. There's plenty of glucosamine both in the barley products and Boomer Boost, another product.
The glucosamine, is that the compound that helps to actually repair them?
Yeah, helps to restore them.
Okay.
And so this now allows you almost at any age to have really great absorption, right? And then, Ann, if you could talk a little bit about the circulation aspect, because now you've absorbed the nutrients, they're in your blood,
Right.
but nothing happens unless you have adequate circulation that will bring those nutrients right to the site of the cell, which it does in the capillaries. So, and if you could tell us a little bit about that microcirculation, and so people can begin to understand what to do to enhance that.
Well, they're just discovering most recently the importance of microcirculation, because up until about 4 years ago, there really were only 3 places in the world that had very, very high powered microscope to be able to see in those nearly invisible to the naked eye microvessels.
So they have a high-powered microscope?
Exactly.
Okay.
And
so it's actually video biophotonics, so you can actually see the blood flowing in the capillary.
Wow. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh,
That's right.
That's okay.
No worries.
And so, yeah, before it was like cost prohibitive, only $25 million piece of equipment. But now, like, a lot of the technology is coming down in price. Now there's hundreds of scientists over the last couple of years that can see into those nearly invisible capillaries. And so because of that, they're coming out with more scientific studies and clinical studies to show, like last year in the Aging and Disease magazine, they announced in May of last year, 2019, that nearly every single chronic disease, those are the diseases that they say you're going to have to take a pill for the rest of your life. Okay, not infectious, but nearly every single chronic disease, now scientists are saying, only is due to poor microcirculation.
And those are the really small vessels.
Extremely small. They say that our cardiovascular system is about 75,000 miles in length. Hard to imagine, but 75% of that is nearly invisible to the naked eye. They said if they pulled it out of our bodies, the average person, it would cover an entire tennis court. And so if you think we get blockages in our arteries in our heart that are the size of a straw, just think how many blockages we must have in those invisible capillaries. You know, and another example, they say pluck out one of your hairs, divide it by 10, in diameter, and that's about the width of those microvessels. So we have hundreds of blockages in our body. And so what's nice about that PEMF device that we have in our homes, a lot of hospitals have it now. The one we have, the only one that is so revered, it's used in 4,000 medical clinics and hospitals, by NASA, by very, very prestigious, revered athletes around the world. And so we have it in our homes, and we just lay on this pad, and in 8 minutes, we're going to have 30% more circulation to those microvessels. But now when we're talking about also what Bob's talking about, this PEMF signal is going to be able to put a nice charge around our cells. So particularly red blood cells, that need to, deliver our oxygen, which later on in the talk, I think he's going to talk about the importance of oxygen.
Right, and the nutrients that the cells need.
Right, when those capillaries can open up, then the blood serum can deliver all the nutrients. Nice. The red blood cells can deliver the oxygen, and they're like dump trucks. Once they dump off the oxygen, then they're like empty dump trucks, and they can pick up the toxins that take them out of our body. And so, of course, your stem cells would want to be clean of toxins, and they'll get nutrified, and they'll have a nice magnetic charge around them to be able to take in the nutrients and push out the toxins.
Excellent. Wow. Thank you, Ann. Thank you. And so, Ann, people, human beings evolved on this planet, planet Earth, has a very specific pattern of light. It's based on our atmosphere, right? So the sun is giving off light, and it's being filtered by a unique atmosphere, and that light arrives on us. It hits our bodies, and also we've evolved in a specific PEMFs, pulsed electromagnetic fields, some from the sun, but even stronger coming from the core of the earth, right? And so our bodies react to those PEMFs from the core of the earth, and so the capillaries actually expand when they encounter those pulses from the core of the earth. And now we're able to mimic that to a degree with mechanical devices that power a mat that you can lie on, and you end up getting a much closer on blast of pulsed electromagnetic forces that help to dilate your capillaries. And you do an 8-minute routine, and for the next 14 hours, your capillaries now are are activated, and you end up with about 30% more circulation, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a lot considering.
Yeah. And so we evolved in this light, and so human beings are absorbing light, and our cells are dependent on light and dependent also on the PEMFs and also on the oxygen that's in the atmosphere. So we're taking a breath and we're taking in all the different gases that are in the atmosphere coming into our lungs, and we're extracting the oxygen, which then rides along, as you say, with the red blood cell in the hemoglobin.
Gets delivered.
Comes through a hopefully robust circulatory system, arrives at the cell along with the nutrients, and this is what constitutes feeding a cell with the proper nutrition. Okay, and so what are the things we want to expect from this with proper nutrition and the right amount of oxygen? One is energy, right? And so human beings are energetic beings. We're up and about, walking around, doing things, and we can only do that because our cells produce energy. So our cells produce a molecule of energy, ATP, that is powering all the other metabolic pathways in our body. And so one of the things about cellular nutrition and feeding is you want to be able to give your mitochondria, the organelle that is responsible for making this energy for the whole rest of the body, you want to give it the right nutrients, right? So first off, it has to have a supply, it has to have a macronutrient supply, which it can burn, right? So proteins, fats, carbohydrates. And in order then to execute this complex cycle that ends up turning it into ATP, requires many actions in a cyclical metabolic pathway called the Krebs cycle. And so if you have enough vitamin B1, 3, 5, 6, coenzyme Q10, those are all substrates necessary to keep that cycle rolling, right?
You know, they say millions of Americans visit the doctor for low energy.
Low energy
Like
is the
every
most low energy is the most common complaint of all doctor visits.
Really?
Right.
I didn't
Most common
realize that.
complaint. And so there's a lot of reasons for low energy, but one big one is, especially in the United States, people are overfed but undernourished. Right? So
That's so true.
we're eating foods that are sugary, and they end up making the sugar ends up getting stored as fat. Okay?
Right.
So there's a number of bad things about eating too much sugar, and this relates to protecting your cells. So if you eat too much sugar, a lot of that sugar gets converted into fat. Okay? And through another metabolic pathway, that fat is making it has a hormonal process that makes it so you never feel full. So the more sugar you eat, the more you want to eat.
Wow.
And also, if you're eating empty calories
Right.
and you're not getting enough of the B vitamins and CoQ10 from the food you eat, or if you can't digest it properly, or if your villi are smothered over, or if your circulation is bad, right? Now you are going to be in a situation where you can't actually make enough of this energy. And so you want to have the right mix of macronutrients and micronutrients to optimize your Krebs cycle so that you can now make energy. And for most people that are complaining of low energy, if you were to give them comprehensive nutrition and teach them how to not eat toxic foods and sugary foods, their energy level is going to go up, usually dramatically. Okay? And so this is how our body makes energy. And once you've made that energy, now all of your other cells begin to work better, because a huge component of cellular health is having enough of this ATP molecule.
What's that stand for?
Adenosine triphosphate.
Okay, ATP.
Right. Okay, so now another big thing is damage to the cells, right? So damage to the cells is caused primarily by endogenous creation of aerobic life, right? So we are a body that's like a log that's burning in the fire. Right. And so we were burning this log in the fire, and over time it burns out. Right. Mm-hmm. So in the case of a log, probably a couple hours it's burnt out. You got to add more to the fire.
Right.
But with humans, it's about 100 years. Okay. And the reason we're burning ourselves up is our metabolic pathways, including the creation of ATP, creates free radicals.
Okay.
And we've done a whole show on free radicals before.
Free radicals, you need scavengers. You need free radical scavengers.
Right. And so the free radicals are actually damaging your tissue, damaging your cells, damaging your telomeres, damaging your DNA. And over time, we literally burn ourselves up. Okay. And so in order to make sure that your cells are not constantly being damaged by free radicals, and mitochondria themselves are damaged by free radicals, they produce free radicals and they're damaged by free radicals. So you want to have enough antioxidants in your nutritional supplements and your food in order to keep that rate of burn down.
Right. Slower the burn,
right.
the longer
So
you live.
You want to slow that rate of burn. Exactly. So, and the superoxide dismutase we talked about earlier that helps the villi also is the main antioxidant for the human body.
Well, what I heard, Bob, is that SOD, which is in your barley, like you call it, is a super antioxidant. And so compared to a regular antioxidant, I think you said that the super antioxidant just keeps recycling and recycling and recycling like for 24 hours, to neutralize more free radicals than just plain antioxidant like from vitamin C.
Right. And you also want to, in considering that, you want to have a combination of antioxidants, okay? Because glutathione, for example, is an antioxidant by itself, but it's also really good at recharging other antioxidants. Mm-hmm. So an antioxidant is essentially you're having an electrical exchange, and so it changes the electrical composition of that molecule. And so the glutathione will come and restore it to its original state so it can work again. Mm-hmm. And that's why you want not only superoxide dismutase, but you want trimethylglycine, and you want glutathione, you want some proanthocyanins, and you want vitamins and minerals, the ACE vitamins, A, C, and E, and you want minerals like selenium and zinc, which are also antioxidants. And they have a synergistic effect. They work together. Okay. And so the opportunity in this day and age of modern nutrition science is when you get products that contain all those antioxidants, you can slow down that rate of burn. And you can actually measure it with a blood test, right? So there's a blood test called C-reactive protein, or CRP. You'll have to ask your doctor for it when you go for your blood work.
What does that actually measure?
CRP is the measure of inflammation in your body, and it is a protein / enzyme that's produced in your liver in reaction to inflammation. Okay. And so it's a biomarker. It's the most important biomarker that the life insurance companies use to determine how long they think you're going to live. So the lower, the better. And so the typical person's CRP on the scale usually comes out at about 3 or 4. A person with diabetes typically is much higher. Okay? And what you want to do is get your CRP down below 0.5. So if you get it down below 0.5, you have a chance to actually rebuild your body faster than you're burning it.
That's the key.
That's the Holy Grail of anti-aging, right? And so by using for example, the Boomers Forever Young Total Health System, all those antioxidants are in that Total Health System. Right. And you can go for blood work and see your CRP and go back 6 months later and look at it again. Typically, it drops by a factor of 10, not 10%, but by 10 times. So if your number is 3, it's going to go to 0.3. Right? Wow. If your number is 5, you can probably get it down to 0.5.
We've had some people that have called us and let us know that's something that's very helpful, specifically diabetics. Yeah, and we have one particular person with diabetes who's had it for many years,
and his CRP went down below zero point 0.1.
Wow.
Even a person whose A1C, which is another test that you want to get, is still very high, and that's the measure of sugar in your blood,
Right.
and that sugar in your blood is creating elevated CRP. Right? So the sugar in your blood doesn't just sit there.
No.
It bumps up against proteins, and you went to a lot of trouble to make these beautiful proteins. The sugar bumps up against it and glycates it and creates a toxin which can damage your cells and throws off a molecule of superoxide, which is the most powerful of all the oxidating compounds.
So like,
right?
it's not superoxide dismutase. This is
It's superoxide, and the superoxide dismutase is what negates it.
Gotcha.
So when you have high blood sugar, you make more superoxide, so you need more superoxide dismutase in order to keep your rate of burns so it's lower.
Right, balance
But
it out.
even the point of the matter is, even with high blood sugar and a high CRP in the range of 5 or 6, we have at least one person who's able to get their CRP below 0.1.
Wow.
Right? So essentially their rate of burn has stopped and they're no longer aging from oxidative stress, which is about 50% of the reason why people age.
That's good stuff.
Okay. And so you want to avoid toxins like sugars. Okay. The other thing's highly damaging is trans fats, right? Trans fats are in foods that are processed foods, and trans fats are in foods that have been improperly cooked. Right. And so if you have oil that has no trans fats, the oil says, hey, cook with this oil, there's no trans fats.
Right.
If you don't know how to cook that oil, it's very quickly going to have trans fats. Okay. The polarity of the bond that's holding the fat together is going to flip, and it's going to move from a cis fat, CIS, to a trans fat. And so if you want to do it right, you have to very, very slowly heat your oil in the pan over the course of a whole hour.
Oh,
Really?
And so you put it on the lowest level, and then come back 5 minutes later and turn it up, and 10 minutes later and turn it up, and very slowly heat it up to about 350 degrees. Anything more than about 350 degrees is going to flip it into a trans fat. And so you want to have a thermometer where you can test this. Okay? And so those trans fats are highly caustic and cause a lot of damage to your body, and that's something to avoid. The other thing about toxins in food is overcooking meat
Right.
with dry temperature. So if you put a hamburger onto the grill or into a frying pan, or even bake it in the oven, if there's no liquid present and you're cooking it over 300 degrees, what happens is, in this case, the sugar in the meat glycates not the protein, but the fat in the meat this time, and creates a glycotoxin, which is one of the most powerful carcinogens or cancer-causing agents that people consume. Even the Center for Disease Control will say this is one of the 2 leading causes of cancer in the United States.
What's burnt meat?
Overcooked meat. Even if it's not burnt, you can cook it medium rare, but if the outside of the hamburger is over 300 degrees while it's cooking, you're consuming glycotoxins that aren't even positively identifiable as food under a microscope. Okay? And so this is going to damage your cells, these toxins, and you want to avoid that. The other things about toxins is air pollution. So people are constantly exposed to tire dust. You're constantly exposed to car fumes. You're constantly exposed to pesticides. So in almost every town, they spray the grass that's in the common areas of the town, and people spray their yards with pesticides.
Yep.
It's on the street. It's
Runoff
on
water.
runoff, but it's also just the drift from the spray gets on the sidewalks, gets in your driveway, gets on the street,
Car door handle.
everywhere. It clings to everything.
Ugh.
And so, but where you collect most of it is on your shoes. So when you go in at night, your shoes during the day have been picking up tire dust, car fumes that have settled into the sidewalks, and pesticides. You're leaving your shoes inside the house, and all night long they're off-gassing, and you're breathing in those toxins. Center for Disease Control right up there with overcooked meat, leading cause of cancer in the United States, leaving your shoes inside the house. Okay? So figure out a way to leave your shoes outside. All right? And so those are some of the toxins. The good news is that when you consume the compounds that are in the products that are in the Boomers Forever Young Total Health System, they are very good at scavenging those toxins and moving them out of your body.
Free radical scavengers, right?
Free radical scavengers, but they also scavenge toxins that aren't necessarily free radicals.
Even better.
Right. And so, for example, if you start taking our barley product, our heirloom barley or the gladiator barley, your body's going to start detoxing, and not just a little bit, right? And that's why you have to ease into it. It comes with a tiny scoop that you take one of for the whole first week, once a day for a week, and then you're able to double that and then keep slowly moving up. And black mold's going to come out of your body. The pesticides are going to come out of your body.
Yep.
A lot of the glycotoxins from the overcooked meat are going to come out of your body. And this is a great way to give yourself a fresh start. So all those cells that you went to all the trouble to make by making adult stem cells now are no longer laden with toxins, and your cells have a chance to function the way they were designed.
That's awesome.
Makes me glad that I've been on these products for a number of years.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like a way to maybe make up for some of the sins of inhaling tire dust. Not that you mean to, but
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds horrible.
Yeah. And so a couple other things is like this. People are protein making machines. Okay. Our body makes at least 100,000 different proteins. And the way we make them is there's a code in your DNA. There's instructions in your DNA for how our body can assemble these proteins. They're pretty complex. And so in that code for how to make these proteins is locked within your DNA, and it's coated up with a protein sheath. And in order for those instructions to be available, something has to ping that protein sheath and unwrap it and unveil the beauty of that code in your DNA.
It's like a force field to Star Wars.
There you go. Right? Yeah.
I got my Star
You
Wars.
got to get through the force field. So you get through the force field, it opens up, there's the information on how to make a protein like, guess what? Superoxide dismutase, right? So you want to be able to make superoxide dismutase, there's a part of a code in your DNA for it. RNA, right? It comes and makes a copy of that unveiled section, comes out into the cell and makes that protein. And it needs to make that protein, it needs amino acids and metabolic enzymes, right? So the amino acids are the building blocks of the protein, and the enzymes are the glue that helps hold it together and splice it and make the attractions, the electrical attractions. All of a sudden now, with the right metabolic enzymes, which your body has about 10,000 different ones, you can now make these beautiful proteins.
And there's those help you carry out the processes.
Right. And so that's what proteins make up every part of your body.
Right.
And so this is important to know, because in order for you to activate that part of your genome, meaning for something to hit that protein sheath and make it unwrap, a lot of it is related to nutrients, which have to be either made inside your body yourself, consumed by mouth, then has to be digested, absorbed, and circulated to get to the cell, to get inside the cell, to get inside the nucleus, to ping that protein sheath, to unwrap that portion of the DNA in order for protein synthesis to occur.
What if it doesn't get there?
Then that protein synthesis simply won't occur. There'll be no genetic activation, no epigenetic activity. And so, for example, vitamin D3, right?
Very important.
Is a molecule that activates somewhere around 20 to 25% of your entire genome for making all of those proteins. So if you're low in vitamin D3, you're going to be low in genetic expression. You're going to be low in the unwrapping portion, and you're going to have a difficult time making that cell function properly. So that cellular function of making proteins is highly, highly dependent on vitamin D3. That's why we put vitamin D3 pills as a separate product in the total health system.
And yours is all natural, and I hear there's a big difference between what we can pretty much get at Walmart, which is probably synthetic compared to all natural. And I think the all natural you taught us was way more effective.
Your body has more of an affinity for it and will utilize it more readily. And so this is another part of nutrition that involves the healthy functioning of the cell.
Functional nutrition.
Yeah, that is going to help create the stimulation of this epigenome. Now, also in that epigenome is the code for making metabolic enzymes. Okay? So if you want those metabolic enzymes, they're going to help splice together the amino acids to make proteins. You have to be able to unwrap the part of your DNA that has the code for how to make that metabolic enzyme.
You got to get the plans.
Right. And so what we do as a holistic nutrition company is we provide a lot of those metabolic enzymes for you by mouth.
Right.
So if for some reason, like age, you're making less of them as you age, it's good to be able to consume them. And so that's why one of our scientists goes to all this trouble to sprout barley seeds, because he knows at a specific spot in the sprouting process, there are about 4,000 different metabolic enzymes in that sprout. And so he's able to stop those sprouts from sprouting right at that moment, stabilize the nutrients with a trade secret, and then grind them up after they've dried out in an old-fashioned stone grinding wheel, and then becomes a powder that Boomers Forever Young is the distributor of. And you can mix that powder in a glass of water with your Boomer Boost and some probiotics and drink it, and you will be infusing your body with about 4,000 of the 10,000 metabolic enzymes you need.
And this is ancient barley.
Yeah.
This is barley it's not barley from this century. It's thousands of years old, the seed line.
Yes. Yeah. We have two different seed lines.
Right.
Heirloom barley and gladiator barley.
Right.
The heirloom is any heirloom seed is pre-1940. Okay. Before they started crossbreeding them and bred out all the proteins and all the nutrients.
Right, all the good
in
stuff.
order to get better germination.
Right.
Our scientist is an expert in germination, and he can germinate the heirloom seeds and the ancient seeds. And so that's what we now have access to. This is part of the new science of holistic nutrition. These types of things, like the creation of Boomer Boost and the discoveries that led to it, and the creation of these sprouted barley seeds, are recent discoveries.
The new science of holistic nutrition is what you said.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Yeah. And so these are recent discoveries that allow for people like us who have been using the products for years to, as we age, to have robust health, right? Because people age faster as they get older. And it makes sense, because if you're aging from free radicals, from oxidative stress, and your body starts making less antioxidants, then you're going to age faster.
And that happens like when you make less digestive enzymes. You just make less antioxidants to battle all the inflammation and stuff.
And so you age faster as you get older, unless you have access to stabilized antioxidants. Some antioxidants have a very short half-life. Half-life means how much time before only half of the product is still available.
Okay.
And so in the case of SOD, it's 10 minutes. So you have to have a way to stabilize it to increase that half-life. And in our case, they increased it to 4 years. So it no longer is being oxidized out of existence.
Wow.
Okay. And so that's called the nutrient stabilization process. It's a trade secret, and it's utilized. And that's why you have to take the barley so slowly. There's so much SOD in there that your body's not used to that amount and not used to detoxing that fast. Okay. And so you have to follow the instructions and go along with it in that regard. The other thing, and we talked about earlier, was the whole issue of hormones. So cellular communication, cellular activity, controlled to a great degree by hormones. And there are numerous glands in your body that produce hormones, and even organs that produce hormones. And so people need to know where they stand in that regard. So having your doctor test your thyroid for your TSH, T3, T4, and reverse T3 for certain, right? And then having a complete female hormone profile, complete male hormone profile. What they're testing there are your sex hormones, right? Which is, pregnenolone, andro, DHEA, testosterone, estradiol, cortisol, etc. And you want to have a full picture of how your body's doing with those hormones, as well as specifically, more in depth on your adrenal hormones. And if you have tests like that, you can easily see where you might need assistance in helping to create a conversion from one to another. And there are numerous nutrients that will help you to balance that whole hormone cascade along the way. And that's something that Boomers for Every Young Nutrition Company can also assist you with. And very important part of cellular health, right? The other thing is, and we talked about this earlier too, turns out that even with all of this effort, it's only 1/10 of the effort necessary, right? Because our bodies, human bodies, are actually only 1/10 human. We are 10% human and 90% bacteria, virus, fungus, parasites, microorganisms that are living inside of us and are living on us. So you actually have more bacteria on the surface of your skin than you have human cells, right?
Amazing.
That sounds amazing, but scary.
Yeah, so we are actually a walking, breathing collection of mostly bacteria, fungus, and virus, and with mixed in a little bit of human. Okay?
As Spock would say, fascinating.
Fascinating. Yeah. And so knowing that this is the case, and bacteria, for example, are responsible in the pathway that makes your neurotransmitters, right?
Right.
Serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, what gives us consciousness, the ability to think and feel, are actually made by bacteria. And so you have to understand that we literally are able to think and talk like we're doing today because of bacteria. And so you want to know, well, what do we do then to make those bacteria function properly?
Right.
Right. And so it turns out that bacteria love fiber. Now, a lot of fiber, when humans eat fiber, will get digested, and then there's none left for the bacteria.
But the bacteria resides lower.
Bacteria starts in your mouth, like bacteria is all over your skin.
Right, I know, but the one that needs the fiber.
Yeah, yes, and that's mostly in your large intestine.
In the large.
But there are bacteria throughout your entire alimentary canal, starting with your mouth. Okay. And so if you can get fiber that is what's called resistant or undigestible fiber, and a lot of fiber is whole flax, psyllium fiber, things like that.
Our barley.
Yeah, and the fiber in the barley makes its way to your large intestine or your gut intact, and the bacteria interacts with that, ferments it, creates metabolites, which are molecules that are part of the human living process that then interact with the human cell, the human DNA, to create all of the magic of the human DNA. So our genetic expression is highly dependent on the interaction of bacteria that are having genetic expression within their DNA based on the foods that we're eating, and thus then creating an interface with the whole human cell aspect of our beingness.
Sounds like a very complicated dance.
Very complicated, and it's happening so fast. Like if you were to say, all right, we're looking at the Krebs cycle, for example, and we just made a molecule of ATP. So how long did that take? Approximately 10 to the minus 22 nanoseconds. So every nanosecond, it's making trillions of molecules of ATP.
Wow.
Okay? And you can look at the back of your hand And the life that's occurring in the back of your hand as you're looking at it is happening so fast that you could speed it up an octillion times and you'd never be able to watch it.
That's crazy.
And so that's how fast things are happening inside of our body. And by the time a day goes by and you take up, the many trillions of human cells and the quadrillions of bacterial cells and all the activity that's occurring and all the communication that's going back and forth between bacteria to human to fungus to virus, human to human, organelle to organelle, it's happening more times per day than there are all the stars in all the galaxies of the universe.
That's almost inconceivable.
Yeah, it is hard to imagine, but nonetheless true.
But you said bacteria, of course, is so important. And then what I'm hearing is that the problem is with we Americans, we need good bacteria and bad bacteria, because you said the good bacteria eat the bad for food, but most Americans have too much bad compared to their good. So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, and a lot of that is because of sugar. The sugar is feeding the bad bacteria and they're proliferating. So you do have to have a semblance of balance of bacteria in your gut. A lot of times people will get an overgrowth of bad bacteria. So there's for example, a thing people get is they call SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And it can totally wreck your life, right? It's such a bad thing that it makes it so you can't digest food, you'll be losing weight, you'll feel sick all the time. It's really miserable disease.
And then fatty liver.
Yeah, and so the other thing is the bad bacteria actually can leak out into your abdominal cavity and infect organs that are in that cavity, including your liver, which will then begin retaining fat. And you'll end up with a fatty liver disease. Okay, and so one of the things you can do for the fatty liver disease is, number one, take a good probiotic that will help, where the good bacteria will help scavenge those bad bacteria, eat less sugar and more undigestible starch, right? And then the other thing that you can do is you can take a compound called phosphatidylcholine. And so choline is a compound that's in your diet, but most people don't get enough of it. And it's converted to phosphatidylcholine, which is the compound that extracts fat from your liver to allow it to be burned for fuel. Okay? So there's phosphatidylcholine in the Boomer Boost product.
That's right.
And that is something you can access by going to the liveforeveryoungradio.com.
You get some more information at liveforeveryoungradio.com.
Right. And so that's the general gist. Each one of these areas can be a podcast in itself. And so we'll, talk about some of the other things. We've already talked about PEMF with Ann. We've talked about stem cells. And another one, we might talk about epigenetics and energy, and maybe a special show, just on toxins, another one on hormones. Yep. And then,
We've covered a lot of ground, and we're going to have to dive deeper in
some
future
of them.
episodes.
Yeah. And so I just want to say, Ann, thanks again for joining us. It's great to have you with us once again.
Love you here, Ann. Thank you.
Well, it's always a pleasure to be here with a great moderator, Raleigh, and also a walking encyclopedia, Bob.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you. And thanks, everybody, for watching and listening to Live Forever Young Radio. And we hope to see you on another show.
Thanks for listening to Live Forever Young Radio. Check us out at liveforeveryoungradio.com.